A viewer left a comment. Normally, most times I would jump to respond and do one of two things. I'd either agree with them and give them a thumbs up, or I disagree and completely roast them in the comments. This video's something entirely different because buried in that comment was a fundamental belief that a lot of Americans seem to be wrestling with now. And yeah, I purposely used the term wrestling. You're welcome. And that belief is that ordinary people no longer matter. The game is somehow rigged, and the American dream, it's gone. Now, whether that's true or not, may be one of the most important questions we can ask ourselves. Because if you believe your voice doesn't matter, you'll stop using it. And if enough people stop using theirs, someone else will gladly step in and speak for them.
Damn it, Jim. I'm a doctor, not a politician.
So let's explore that. Is that true? Is he right? What can we do about it?
We can still believe, 'cause BossMan is on the air.
And the story continues. BossMan on the air here, broadcasting for the American dream, built on faith, sustained by freedom, because the story isn't over. And today's story takes us down the lane of whether or not the American dream has in fact died. Now, think about that for just a moment, because if we're being honest, and that's what this channel is about, every generation I've ever seen has had people telling them that the dream was over. Go back to the Great Depression. Folks were standing in bread lines wondering how they were going to feed their families. If anybody had a reason to say the dream was dead, that would be one of them. Then came World War II. Millions of Americans shipped overseas, families separated, entire futures put on hold.
Yeah. Martha's really looking to have some fun this weekend.
Then the 70s. With that came inflation, gas line, economic uncertainty. People wondering if the country's best days were behind them.
Hey, Jim, that was an awesome game you threw earlier.
Yeah, Jim, way cool.
Then came factory closures, farm prices, recessions, housing prices, you name it. Everything from dot-com bubbles right down to COVID. And through every one of those chapters, somebody was standing on a street corner somewhere saying, the American dream is dead. If the American dream died back then, why did people start businesses? Why do truck drivers keep buying their first truck? Why do immigrants keep coming here looking for an opportunity that doesn't exist where they came from? Now, don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying life is easy. I'm certainly not saying that problems aren't worth talking about. What I am saying is maybe we've been having this same argument for generations and just talking ourselves in circles. Maybe the question is whether the dream is dead. Maybe we've stopped looking for it, because if every generation thinks they're the first ones to face hardship, they face something very important. The people who came before us also faced hardship too. And somehow, many of them found a way to move forward anyway. That brings us to another part of this comment that I was talking about. Go back to my last video and read it for yourself, because if you're sitting there thinking,
Boss man, hold on a minute. Things may not be perfect, but surely something's changed. Look around, man.
that's a fair question. After all, we can all see that wealth has become concentrated in the hands of fewer people. We can see billionaires. We can see major corporations. We all complain about them.
Each year, pharmaceutical companies spend billions of dollars on television advertising, and most patients know the drug's name before they know the disease's name. We don't have a healthcare system. We have a health business plan.
Let's not pretend people are imagining these concerns. The real question is what these concerns really mean. Are we looking at a system that's completely rigged against ordinary Americans? Or are we seeing something that has existed throughout history where a relatively small percentage of people produce, own, influence, or control a large percentage of resources, and the other just has to deal with it? In other words, Are we dealing with corruption? Or are we looking at a version of what many people call the 80-20 rule?
Every generation thinks they got uniquely unlucky, that the system broke specifically for them. But the pattern is always the same throughout history. Boom, bubble, then crash. The dream was quietly rewritten into the punchline. Well, everyone was just too busy working to notice.
Because if the system's completely rigged and the average citizen almost has no certain path forward. But if the picture is more complicated than that, then maybe this discussion shifts from who to blame to where the opportunity still lies. And that's important because before this conversation's over, I want to spend some time talking about the pathway that still exists today, what some of those obstacles may be standing in their way, and why I believe some of our biggest challenges may not be where most people are in fact looking, but instead how they're getting there. As I was reading through this comment, one thing that jumped out at me and caught my attention was how much responsibility was being placed on a handful of powerful people. And before anybody misunderstands me, powerful people do matter. Presidents matter. Congress, corporations, all that. Anybody paying attention to life in general can see that. They all do matter. But here's the question I keep coming back to. How much power should we give them over our thinking? Because there's a difference between recognizing influence and surrendering to it. If I convince myself that one politician controls my future, then I've already handed over more power than that politician could ever take from me. If I convince myself that one billionaire determines whether I succeed or fail, then I've already surrendered something that belongs to me, my initiative, my voice.
We have a failing K-12 education system in the United States. Those young people will never have a fighting chance if we don't take care of them. And I think that's the biggest problem this country faces. It's been that way for 10 years. We measure it, we don't fix it.
Education is also a function of poverty. And if you're asking teachers to fix
more
the
than just
inherent
teach.
systemic
Yes, I agree.
economic disparities, I think you're putting too much on people.
I'm not blaming the teachers. I'm
just saying.
I'm saying if you start out that far behind when you've come into your first job, good grief.
But you know,
everything we're going to suggest much, much harder.
Education is not a panacea. Education has become a political ruse.
Every one of us is given differences for a reason. That's reality. But reality also tells us something else. Throughout history, people have faced wars, depressions, inflation, factory closures, family hardships, and every kind of uncertainty life could throw at you. And yet, somehow, every generation kept finding ways to build business, raise families, buy homes, create opportunity, leave something behind they didn't have when they started for those who came after them. Because they refused to believe someone else had all the cards. Maybe that's where this commenter was actually coming from. Maybe the biggest challenge facing America is the growing belief that ordinary people no longer matter, that our voice doesn't. But if that's true, then why are politicians constantly trying to win your vote? Why are corporations constantly trying to earn your business with the many ways in which they advertise? Why are content creators constantly trying to earn your attention? The answer is simple. Because ordinary people still do matter. Question is, do you believe that? Before we wrap this up, I want to talk about something else that doesn't get enough attention. Because we're serious about creating opportunity and about strengthening communities. And if we're serious about helping the next generation, and we also have to be willing to look at some of the barriers that exist today. Whether you're preparing for success or simply preparing others to complain about the lack of it, this is a conversation worth having, because regardless of where you stand politically, one thing remains true. Silence is our enemy. Silence guarantees somebody else will make the decision and will shape the conversation you refuse to have. Whether you're talking about your community, your industry, your state, or your family, it's a dangerous place to be. So maybe the question isn't whether ordinary Americans still have a voice. Maybe the question is whether we're willing to use it. And you know what? As far as I'm concerned, if enough people decide they do, then the story continues.